Over 20 faculty members of the UP School of Economics urge President Bongbong Marcos to seriously reconsider signing the Maharlika Fund Bill into law. The economics professor said the proposed sovereign wealth fund is beyond repair and poses serious risks to the economy and the public sector. Joining us now is UP School of Economics Assistant Professor JC Punongbayan. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on The Final Word. This paper from the UP School of Economics is very critical of this Maharlika investment bill. Did you not find, when you were breaking down each part of this bill, any advantages, any positives that this Maharlika investment bill will help our countrymen and the economy?
Thank you, Rico, for having me. We are not opposed to the very idea of a strategic investment fund or a sovereign wealth fund. However, we need to meet certain conditions in order for that kind of institution to work, especially in this time of economic distress in the global economic environment. It's not a very good time to invest. And the goals of the Maharlika Investment Fund, until the bill was passed by both houses of Congress, is still not clear. And in fact, the BSP governor, Felipe Medalla, was quoted as saying that he actually doesn't really know what it will be for exactly. And I think if you look at the experiences of other countries, they have been very clear about their objectives, about the expected returns from investments.
So, Professor,
as well as the governance structure is very clear and they ensure independence. So across all of these and many other aspects of the bill, there are many defects. And we are afraid that this is really beyond repair.
Defects beyond repair. But, Professor, the people that we voted into office, our lawmakers, our congressmen, and our senators, with whole heart and by a majority vote in the lower house and in the Senate, voted for this Maharlika Investment Fund bill. They represent the Filipino people. They represent us in Congress. What are you saying then? They did not do their job?
What this is saying is there's a failure in the ability of the lawmakers to represent the interests of the general public. And we are rather disappointed as well with the economic managers of President Marcos, who, by the way, were former professors and even deans of the UP School of Economics, where we work, because the flaws are so inherent, and this should have been flagged by an economist, especially with their stature, a PhD-wielding economist. So we expect highly of them that they will advise the president accordingly. However, as manifested in the unusual speed by which they were able to pass this measure, this was just introduced in November, and now in June, it's just waiting for the signature of the president. In other countries, it takes them years in order to study any such proposal, especially one that will rope in tremendous amounts of public funds. The authorized capital of Maharlika is 500 billion pesos, which is 2.5 times the capital of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas itself. And in fact, the Maharlika Investment Corporation will be roping in dividends from the BSP, delaying the BSP's own capitalization efforts.
But Professor,
yeah.
Professor, yes, we see your point. There are flaws, but won't this help the economy in the long run? It's better to start the fund sooner rather than later, so we could see the fruits when implemented in the medium to long term, because the final version of the Senate bill explicitly prohibits state-run pension funds such as the GSIS and the SSS, the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, the Home Development Mutual Fund, the Overseas Welfare Workers Association, and the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office from investing in Maharlika. Isn't this sufficient enough to trust the fund and its measures?
When you look at other sovereign wealth funds abroad, Rico, you will see that there, in the establishing law, there are specific provisions about bankruptcy. Because at the end of the day, these are still investments, financial investments, which could lose. In other words, the public funds that are poured into various investments, especially if not vetted well, might disappear into thin air. And that has huge implications, of course, when we're talking about the taxpayers' money, 50 billion of which will be roped in here. And even if the lawmakers prohibited GSIS and SSS from investing, actually there's still a possibility for them to rope in such funds. Because, for example, even the president himself broached the idea that GSIS and SSS can still pour some money into Maharlika and its projects, and the finance secretary himself supported or echoed that idea. And the lack of any provisions about bankruptcy implies that there will be an implicit guarantee of the government if the Maharlika Investment Fund loses money. And the fact that the board, which controls the Maharlika Investment Corporation, are all presidential appointees,
Right.
it only makes it a lot susceptible to politicization
Professor, I see your points. No, you've mentioned it in many various ways. But why is the president fast tracking? He said that this was an urgent bill that has to be passed by the Senate before its recess. I mean, the president and the government and our Congress must be seeing something positive, no, about this Maharlika Investment Fund Bill that would benefit the people and our economy.
Yes, well, they make some vague reference about the promoting economic growth and everything.
How
However,
do you think,
until now, there is no feasibility study, detailed feasibility study that proves that the Maharlika Investment Fund will be able to spur growth and development over and above what other agencies are already doing. For example, the National Development Corporation. So this is called additionality in the literature. And for any sovereign wealth fund to have that solid rationale, it must prove that additionality. What can it bring to the table exactly over and above what the government is already doing?
So,
will investments be faster? Will infrastructure be built faster in this sense? There's no assurance at all.
I agree with you. There's no certainty, no assurance at all. But if you at least look at the positive side, Professor, how soon? Because for sure, we may see the president signing this Maharlika investment bill into law sooner rather than later. Any positive that you see out of this potential law that will really benefit our people? Or is there nothing at all?
Well, they always mention RICO, the fact that they will be funding a lot of infrastructure projects. But as we know from experience, it will take several years from inception to actual construction of these infrastructure projects. It could take, for example, 8 to 10 years for a specific project. So the economic returns from any of these projects that Maharlika will be funding will be far into the future, and in the meantime, we might be experiencing losses if it invests, for example, in financial instruments given the global environment.
Professor, we have 10 seconds before the end of this interview. The president is listening to us now. What is your advice to President Bongbong Marcos? What should he do with this bill?
Please veto the bill and allow greater discussion and scrutiny by the public.
UP School of Economics Professor JC Punongbayan, thank you so much for your insights.